On the afternoon of November 19th, 2005, the urgent ring of an emergency phone call echoed through the Jae-young police station in Cheongcheongnam-do province. The worried voice of a middle-aged woman cut through the quiet atmosphere. "My husband went to a dinner party last night but still hasn't come home. Mr. Kim, 52 years old, an accounting department head at a local university, had mysteriously vanished. Everything had started seemingly normal. After work on the 18th, he enjoyed dinner with colleagues in downtown Cheonan. The gathering ran late into the night, as it had many times before. While his wife waited patiently at home, at 10:30 p.m., the phone suddenly rang. Her husband's familiar voice came through the line. 'Honey, it's me. A colleague got too drunk. I can't let him go home alone. I'll stay to take care of him and come home in the morning.' With his character of always caring thoughtfully for those around him, Mr. Kim often acted this way. His wife was accustomed to this dedication, so she didn't worry about anything more. However, when dawn broke and she called her husband, his phone was completely silent. Time passed minute by minute until 2 p.m., past lunch, there was still no news. Anxiety began to surge. She hurriedly contacted her husband's colleagues to find out his whereabouts, but the answer struck her like lightning. The party ended at 8:30 p.m. yesterday. Mr. Kim also said he would go home and went to the parking lot with everyone else. No one went to a sauna. The pieces didn't fit together. The husband she knew would never lie about things like this. The prolonged silence of his phone was like an alarm bell in her mind. A terrifying intuition rushed over her. Something truly serious had happened. Unable to hesitate any longer, she immediately contacted the police. Meanwhile, the police who received this report were all tense. The reason was they thought it might be related to a series of recent consecutive robberies that had been rampaging throughout the Cheongcheong-do area. On March 6, 2005, in Ochang, Mr. Choi, 34 years old, was driving his imported car on a familiar road when a minor collision suddenly occurred. This seemed like a normal accident, but when he got out to check, two strangers from the car behind immediately rushed forward. They quickly tied him with cables and robbed his bank card. Although the empty account made the cash withdrawal fail, the robbers' fury cost Mr. Choi his life, strangled to death in a brutal manner. Just 11 days later, at 4 a.m. on March 17th in Cheonan, Mr. Min was driving on a deserted road when a person in police uniform signaled him to stop. Thinking this was a routine check, Mr. Min obediently got out of his car. However, as soon as his feet touched the ground, two robbers rushed at him with knives. In panic, Mr. Min fought desperately and was lucky to escape despite being stabbed and losing his wallet. On November 16th, their methods became even more sophisticated and bold. At a wealthy house in Boryong, 3 people disguised as journalists appeared at the door of Mr. Lee's family, 28 years old. They claimed to be a KBS filming crew, there to make a documentary. With their professional appearance, they were easily invited into the house. But as soon as they crossed the threshold, they robbed bank cards and brutal attacks ensued. In rare luck, Mr. and Mrs. Lee survived. When connecting the 3 cases together, a terrifying picture began to emerge. Although they occurred in different locations, they all shared eerily common characteristics. A knife was the deadly weapon that appeared in all cases. The initial motive all pointed toward money. The question arose, was there any video evidence to track down the perpetrator? Police meticulously reviewed security cameras in the area. However, hope quickly vanished. The criminals had prepared thoroughly, perfectly concealing their faces, making identification impossible. But in desperation, an unexpected clue opened up thanks to the investigators' astuteness. They discovered that the key to linking the cases didn't lie in the concealed faces, but in a seemingly insignificant detail: the vein pattern on the back of the hand. This wasn't a conventional method in investigation. Each person's vein pattern is unique, like fingerprints, carrying unchangeable biological characteristics. The National Science Institute conducted meticulous analysis of video footage from security cameras of all 3 cases. Although faces remained a mystery, the dim images of the perpetrator's hands became important evidence. Through comparing vein patterns, a chilling truth was confirmed. All were committed by the same person. Thus, the veil of mystery was lifted. A cold-blooded killer was hunting victims throughout the Chungcheongdo region according to a cruel plan. Now, looking back at Mr. Kim's disappearance with this new clue, all the pieces began to fit together terrifyingly. Mr. Kim, a man driving an expensive imported car, completely fit the criteria the killer had established. Not only was he a potential victim, but his expensive car had also vanished along with its owner. Reconstructing that fateful night, from the drinking establishment to home, was only about a 10-minute walk, but with alcohol in his system, driving himself was impossible. Mr. Kim had certainly called a designated driver service. However, this could have been the moment of death. The killer, with the thorough preparation shown in previous cases, could have easily impersonated a driver to approach the victim. Even more worrying was the sign of escalation in the criminal's behavior. In the 3 previous cases, he had shown determination to kill. Only 2 victims had luckily escaped death by a hair's breadth. With Mr. Kim, a middle-aged man without the ability to resist like the younger victims before, the danger became extremely serious. The search began immediately. Police deployed forces throughout the area, conducting meticulous interrogations of every resident. They focused on the period from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., the last hours when Mr. Kim was believed to have been kidnapped. This was precisely the most dangerous time period when he could have fallen into the killer's hands. But despite knocking on every door, despite questioning everyone present in the area at that time, no one witnessed anything suspicious. 2005, an era when security cameras and car black boxes were still luxury items, allowing criminals to dissolve into the night without leaving a trace. However, police still held on to a ray of hope based on experience from previous cases. In each attack, the killer had a habit of robbing victims' bank cards to withdraw cash. At this point, the banking system remained silent, with no signs of transactions on Mr. Kim's card. But experienced investigators knew this was just the calm before the storm. Based on the established pattern, the criminal would certainly soon make the next move. The entire police force was ready in a state of high alert. Every ATM in the city closely monitored. Every suspicious transaction could trigger a chase. While police were tensely waiting for signs from the bank card, an unexpected event occurred at the victim's own home. Ding dong! The doorbell rang around 6 p.m., breaking the tense silence enveloping Mr. Kim's apartment. His wife opened the door and saw a taxi driver standing at the threshold. When she asked about his purpose, the strange man replied calmly, "I was asked to deliver something," then handed her a wedding invitation. A wedding invitation? Why a wedding invitation? When she held it, she recognized this was an old invitation. The wedding date had passed long ago. While confused and not understanding this situation, she opened the invitation and discovered inside was a small piece of paper with her husband's familiar handwriting. The trembling lines seemed written under urgent circumstances. "My dear, I'm in a very difficult situation. Please come to the Seobu Station taxi terminal at 4 p.m. on November 21st, prepare 50 million won, $37,500 in cash, and come in our son's car. Give it to the person there. My dear, I'm sorry for this suddenness. Everything was wrong. So wrong. The writing style, circumstances, and especially the enormous amount of money requested." This clearly wasn't a normal situation her husband could encounter. Not daring to delay, she immediately reported to the police. Meanwhile, the investigation force quickly tracked down the taxi driver, the person who could be the key to finding the mastermind. However, once again, they faced failure. The apartment had no security camera system, and the driver vanished from the city without leaving any trace. But this time, police knew exactly where and when the criminal would appear. This was the only opportunity to face the perpetrator of the horrific crime series directly. A sophisticated plan was deployed. They prepared a money bag according to the exact request, but with special adjustments. A layer of real money on top to pass superficial inspection, fake money below to minimize loss, and most importantly, a tiny GPS device carefully hidden inside. The fateful day of November 21st arrived. At the Seobu Station taxi terminal, Mr. Kim's wife stood silently with the bag of 50 million won, $30,500 in her hand, the price the criminal demanded in exchange for her husband's life. Around the area, dozens of detectives had hidden in every corner of the street, every coffee shop, ready for the confrontation that could determine Mr. Kim's fate. At exactly 4:05 p.m., a delivery motorcycle appeared like a ghost. The rider wore a completely covered jacket, approaching Mr. Kim's wife cautiously. No words, no communication, just a short nod. He quickly took the money bag and sped away immediately. Police immediately chased the motorcycle through Cheonnan's narrow streets. But what happened next surprised them. The delivery person didn't go straight to a hideout but stopped at an ordinary Jae-young restaurant. He went in, handed the money bag to the counter owner as if this was just an ordinary business transaction, then disappeared. The criminals' plan was more sophisticated than they thought. Police quickly adjusted tactics, pretending to be ordinary customers entering the restaurant. They ordered food, sipped each bite, but their eyes never left the money bag and every movement around. The atmosphere in the restaurant was calm, but beneath that surface was extreme tension. 30 minutes passed. Suddenly, a yellow taxi stopped in front. The driver entered, exchanged a few words with the counter owner, took the money bag and disappeared again into traffic. The chase continued, this time to Bokmyong. Here, the scenario repeated once more. The money bag was transferred to the tavern owner inside the house like an ordinary package. The detectives once again transformed into customers, sitting amid the noisy atmosphere of the tavern, but ears and eyes tensely alert to the maximum. At 6:40 p.m., a phone ring cut through the surrounding conversation. The tavern owner picked up, "Ah, yes, the bag has been delivered. Ah, you're coming soon? Yes, I understand." Here it was, the call they had been waiting for. The killer was finally about to appear. Time passed minute by minute, intense waiting. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. The tavern was still bustling with customers coming and going, but the criminal didn't appear. The veteran police with many years of experience realized that the killer had sniffed out the danger. Perhaps during observation, he had discovered the police presence and decided to retreat. No longer time for regret, the investigation force immediately switched to Plan B. They quickly deployed a campaign to trace everyone involved in the money bag transfer chain: the delivery rider with the mysterious mask, the Jae-young restaurant owner, the tavern owner, and the taxi driver. Each person in one interrogation room, each question asked with hope of finding just one small clue. However, all gave the same answer, simple to the point of suspicion. Someone came to hire me, gave 20,000 won, $15, told me to transfer this bag from here to there. I thought it was just ordinary odd jobs. No one knew anything about the true source of this request. A moment of disappointment flooded the entire investigation team. They had been so close to the target, just one more step, but now we're back at the starting line. The men who had fought crime for many years couldn't hide their dejected expressions. However, just when everyone's spirits were at their lowest, an unexpected ray of light appeared. The Jae-young restaurant owner, the middle-aged man carefully cleaning tables and chairs, suddenly remembered something. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "Officers, there's this. Yesterday, 2 men came to my restaurant. They ate and drank for quite a while, then asked me to keep the bag. So the bottles they used, do you still have them?" A quick-thinking officer immediately asked with eyes flashing with hope. Fortunately, the owner hadn't yet thrown away the soju bottles the criminals had used. Those small glass bottles, seemingly worthless, now became the most precious objects in the investigation. Fingerprint experts were summoned immediately. Every square centimeter on the soju bottle surface was meticulously examined. And then, after days and months of darkness, the true identity of the killer was finally revealed. The fingerprint analysis result was like a lightning strike. Jong-in, 43 years old. This name was not unfamiliar to South Korea's justice system. Jong-in's sinful life began very early. From his high school years, he had joined violent gangs and continuously caused trouble. Bloody fights had sent the teenager Kim Jong-in straight to reform school. Adulthood brought no positive change. On the contrary, he was like a wild beast released from a cage, more dangerous, more bold, and more cruel. His criminal record was thick with charges of armed robbery, and particularly terrifying was an attack on police with weapons that left one person seriously injured. This wasn't just an ordinary criminal, this was a potential killer ready to murder anyone who stood in his way. Now, knowing his identity clearly, the task seemed simple. Find and arrest Jong-in. But reality was much more complex. He had lived like a ghost in society, completely separated from all conventional tracking systems. No phone registered under his name, because he knew that would be the fastest way to be discovered. No fixed residence, because someone like him always had to be ready to flee. No vehicles, bank cards, or any legal assets. Kim Jong-in had made himself invisible, existing in the gaps of modern society. How do we find him? The headache question for every police officer on the team. They were like looking for a needle in a haystack in a city of millions, when the target could hide anywhere at any time. But fortunately, Jong-in's criminal past ultimately became his own weakness. In the police traffic database's massive repository, an old violation record became a valuable guide. A few years earlier, he had been fined for traffic violations. But interestingly, the car he was driving then didn't belong to him. The real owner of the car was a woman, and according to records, this was his ex-girlfriend. With the mindset of drowning people grasping at the last straw, police decided to pursue this thin clue. They searched throughout the city to find Jong-in's ex-girlfriend, a woman who might hold the key to the killer's hideout. When they finally found her, the detectives asked with caution, but also hope. "Do you still contact Jong-in? Do you know where he's hiding?" But hope quickly shattered. The woman shook her head. "We broke up long ago. I don't know anything about him." Once again, the investigation path seemed to hit a dead end. The detectives prepared to leave with heavy hearts, when suddenly the woman seemed to remember something. "Oh wait, speaking of this, there was a friend who used to work with him. That person's name was quite strange. Jae-young or something." Jae-young, a name that sounded ordinary but became the light at the end of the tunnel. Police computers quickly searched the information. Jae-young, a classmate from the same high school as Jong-in, who had worked together at a company in 2004. But more importantly, he also had a thick criminal record. 2 criminals with prior convictions, same school, same workplace. Could this be coincidence? Or was this precisely the killer duo causing the series of horrific crimes? Police immediately collected criminal photos of Jae-young from the database. They took it to meet the Seolyongtang restaurant owner. "Do you recognize this person?" The question was asked in suspense. The restaurant owner looked carefully at the photo, squinted thoughtfully for a moment, then nodded confidently. "Yes, that's right. This is one of the 2 men that day." But one witness wasn't enough. Police continued taking the photo to meet the lucky survivors from previous attacks. Mr. Min, the man who escaped death by a hair's breadth when attacked by the fake police officer. Mr. and Mrs. Lee, the survivors after being deceived by the KBS filming crew. One by one, they all gave the same answer with confident tones. "That's right. This is him. I could never forget that face." Like the final pieces in the mysterious puzzle, everything began to become clear. Not a lone killer. This was a dangerous criminal duo operating systematically. And now, police knew the identities of both, clearly. With 2 identities confirmed, police faced a tactical choice. Kim Jong-in, the main perpetrator, was currently somewhere in the shadows, like a wild animal that knew how to hide. Searching for him in this vast city was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. In contrast, Jae-young seemed more approachable. The decision was made to focus on Jae-young first, then from him, lead to Jong-in. But Jae-young wasn't a fool. With the instincts of a long-time criminal, he sensed danger approaching. The police dragnet was tightening day by day, hour by hour. And in this situation, his selfish nature was revealed nakedly. Instead of facing the risk of being caught, Jae-young chose the most despicable path, betraying his accomplice. He secretly contacted his biological older brother and said, "Brother, Jong-in is currently hospitalized in Dobong-gu, Seoul. He's having surgery to remove a cyst. I know the exact address." This wasn't an action stemming from conscience or remorse. This was a cold and cunning calculation. Jae-young knew that if police concentrated all efforts on catching Jong-in, he would have time to erase traces and flee. The information was passed from brother to police coincidentally, and Jae-young's plan succeeded, at least temporarily. On December 24th, exactly as reported, Jong-in was found at a hospital in Dobong-gu in a completely unexpected condition. He had just undergone minor surgery and was in recovery, completely unaware that he had been sold to police by his accomplice. The arrest proceeded smoothly. Jong-in, in a weakened state after surgery, couldn't resist. But more importantly was the search of his hideout, a dark basement hiding horrific secrets. A killer's weapons cache was revealed: sharp knives, metal cutters used to dismember bodies, steel cables used to tie up victims. But most notable were the premium golf clubs and luxury watch. These were Mr. Kim's belongings, the man who had vanished in the night and whose fate was now determined. The interrogation of Jong-in began like a psychological battle. In the cold interrogation room, he sat with a defiant attitude, firmly denying all accusations. "I didn't do anything. You officers arrested the wrong person." But when the luxury watch, Mr. Kim's premium golf clubs were presented, Jong-in's expression began to change. His eyes were no longer arrogant, but turned to worry like a cornered animal. He stammered, sweat beginning to drip on his forehead. I did take Mr. Kim's car, but I didn't kill anyone. I just stole the car." These weak excuses only made his situation worse. And then, in a final effort to save his life, Jong-in threw all the blame on his accomplice. "Jae-young, he's the one who killed people," Kim Jong-in screamed with a desperate voice. "After he killed Mr. Kim, he threw the body into a canal in Asan, Cheongnam. I didn't participate in the killing." Information about the body's location was provided by Kim Jong-in like a desperate gift, hoping this cooperation would help him escape the most serious charge. The rescue and forensic team was mobilized immediately. At the canal in Asan, a horrific scene was revealed. Mr. Kim's body was found in a tragic state. His face had been destroyed beyond recognition. His right arm was severely damaged, possibly from wounds during torture. Rope fibers still remained around his wrists and ankles, telling the story of the final painful hours. And especially, purple bruises around his neck showed he had been strangled to death. A slow and cruel death. This discovery confirmed what everyone had feared most. Mr. Kim couldn't survive the kidnapping. After providing information about the body, Jong-in fell completely silent. He refused to answer any other questions. This wasn't the attitude of someone with late remorse, but the cold calculation of a professional criminal. Now, to clarify the complete truth, police had to find the final piece of the puzzle: Jae-young. But while Jong-in was caught, Jae-young had time to erase traces. He had vanished like a ghost. However, experienced police knew that no one could disappear completely. There's always some thread, some connection that could be overlooked, and that clue lay in Jae-young's very act of betrayal. He had contacted his brother to report about Jong-in, but how when he had no registered phone? The answer could only be, his brother had come to meet him directly. And if so, his brother's phone would leave traces of places he had been. From this deduction, they traced his brother's phone location. Indeed, the truth that he frequently visited a studio apartment in Ansan, Gyeonggi-do, was revealed. This was the hideout. Police prediction was accurate. February 15th, 2006 marked the end of the long manhunt. At dawn, when Seoul was still sleeping, the special task force surrounded the studio apartment in Ansan. The door was broken in a lightning raid, and Jae-young, the one who had been fleeing for months, was finally caught. The most interesting detail in this arrest wasn't his resistance, but what was in his hands: a Chinese language textbook. Jae-young had been preparing to flee to China to start a new life with a fake identity. If the investigation had been delayed just a few more weeks, this killer might have permanently disappeared in vast China across the border. The search of his car revealed more shocking evidence: an authentic police belt, industrial flashlight used in construction, and especially a sophisticatedly crafted fake license plate. This was precisely the toolkit he had used to impersonate police, deceive victims into stopping and falling into the death trap. But instead of showing remorse or fear, Jae-young had a completely unexpected reaction. As soon as he was handcuffed, he screamed with an indignant voice, "I helped you officers catch Jong-in. I cooperated. Why are you arresting me?" Unbelievable. This criminal actually thought betraying his accomplice would buy leniency. He continued insisting, "Kim Jong-in is the main perpetrator. I was just a lackey, just following his orders. I'm very wronged." Now, with both suspects caught and both blaming each other, the biggest question was, who was really lying? To understand the truth, we need to go back to the source of this toxic relationship. In September 2004, at an ordinary tavern in Seoul's outskirts, two miserable people met in poverty. Jong-in was going through the darkest days of his life. After being released from prison, he had poured all his heart into running a small seafood restaurant, hoping to restart his life. But fate didn't support him. The store went bankrupt after just a few months. With no other choice, Jong-in had to take manual labor jobs, driving taxi at night to earn rent money, working as a construction assistant at building sites to have money for food. The hands that once held knives to kill now had to hold hammers and cranes. But no matter how hard he tried, life was never easy for someone with a criminal record like him. 2003 could be considered a fateful year in Jong-in's life, but not in a positive sense. A traffic accident had brought him compensation of 100 million won, $75,000, an enormous amount that could completely change his life. But instead of using this money wisely, he fell into the world of Jae-young gambling, a form of bicycle racing where, like horse racing, people bet on athletes before races begin. It must be understood that Jae-young, like horse racing, is recognized by South Korean law as legal sports gambling. However, this is still pure gambling, and like all other forms of gambling, it can swallow someone's entire fortune in an instant. And Jong-in was living proof of this. Day after day, he bet hoping to earn more money. Day after day, he lost and tried to recover with bigger bets. This dark cycle had swallowed not only the 100 million won compensation, but also pushed him into enormous debt. When assets were depleted and creditors began threatening, his marriage also collapsed. His wife, unable to endure the stressful and unstable life anymore, chose divorce. Kim Jong-in didn't just lose money and house, but also lost his family. It was precisely in this desperate and lonely situation that Jae-young appeared like a ray of light at the end of the tunnel. With a sincere tone and sympathetic eyes, he suggested, "Mr. Jong-in, I see you're having difficulties. The stone company I'm working at might need more people. Would you like to try?" For Kim Jong-in then, this wasn't just a job opportunity, but a chance for salvation. But fate seemed to mock him. Just a few weeks after Jong-in started working at the stone company, this business suddenly fell into financial crisis. It could be due to market recession, poor management, or simply bad luck. Employee salaries were cut, then stopped completely. Finally, both Jong-in and Jae-young had to pack up and leave the workplace. Standing before the company's closed doors, the two men looked at each other with desperate eyes. They had both hit rock bottom, both experienced failure, and both had nothing left to lose. It was precisely then that the idea of the dark path began to sprout in their minds. When all legitimate paths were blocked, like two cornered wild animals, Jong-in and Jae-young transformed from victims of circumstances into dangerous predators. They decided to plan robberies to have money for living expenses and debt payments. They decided to kill because both had tasted prison food. They understood that letting victims survive only meant digging their own graves. No one was allowed to live to testify. They set an ambitious and cold-blooded goal. 1 billion won, 750,000. No more, no less. Enough for us to disappear and start over. This number wasn't random but carefully calculated, large enough to ensure financial freedom, but not too greedy to attract unnecessary attention. Chungcheong-do was chosen as the first battlefield, not by chance. This was land they knew like the back of their hands. Their operation method showed terrifyingly meticulous preparation. They weren't impulsive criminals, but professional hunters. Before each case, they spent many days observing targets. Who were the wealthy people in the area? What were their daily movement routes? What were their personal habits? Then they impersonated reporters to approach homes, wore police uniforms to create trust, or deliberately caused accidents to force victims to stop. This crime spree had been prolonged and bloody like this until justice finally found them. But when caught, the friendship bonded by blood and crime shattered. Instead of facing consequences together, Jong-in and Jae-young became mortal enemies. The interrogation room became an arena where each tried to push their accomplice into the abyss to save their own life. He's the main perpetrator. No, he gave the orders. Accusations flew back and forth like arrows. Science once again became the fair judge. Vein pattern analysis from security cameras showed that the person who directly withdrew money from victims' cards was Kim Jong-in. This undeniable evidence placed him in the position of main perpetrator. Nevertheless, Jong-in firmly denied until his last breath. Conversely, Jae-young chose a completely different strategy: cooperation and confession. He not only admitted what was known, but also revealed 6 additional cases police had never heard of. Suddenly, 4 horrific cases became 10, including 2 robbery murders, 1 robbery with injury, 1 attempted robbery murder, and 2 special thefts. The scope of crimes exceeded police imagination. They weren't just facing 2 individual criminals, but a systematic murder enterprise. Jae-young's cooperative attitude and apparent remorse were noted by the court. Result: Kim Jong-in received the death penalty. Jae-young only got life imprisonment. This obvious injustice drove Jong-in mad. Why do only I have to die? We did it together. While Jae-young accepted the sentence and didn't appeal, Jong-in was determined to fight to the end. An appeals trial was opened, and precisely then, another unexpected turn occurred. At the beginning of January 2007, just a few weeks before the decisive trial, a mysterious letter reached Cheonan police. The sender was none other than Jong-in, the one sitting waiting for execution day. And the letter's content would once again shake the entire case. The content read, "Dear investigator, actually there are other murder cases that haven't been revealed. Please come see me." Police went to meet him, but Jong-in was arrogant and silent. However, the officer in charge didn't give up and met Jong-in daily for 4 days, after persistent persuasion efforts, finally leading to confession. What did he say? The killing of Mr. Kim, I did it correctly, but those cases Jae-young confessed to, additionally, 6 cases, right? It's not just that. Jong-in's shocking confession was there were 12 more criminal cases, and there were even other accomplices. These were Jong-in's biological older brother Kim Ki-hoon and a person named Ki-joon, total of 4 people. Police hearing this confession must have been stunned. The result of comparing testimonies with each case, the confessions were all confirmed as truth. But a question arises here. Why did Jong-in suddenly confess? Late conscience? Of course not. The reason was he wasn't satisfied because Jae-young received a lighter sentence than him. Therefore, by revealing additional crimes to increase Jae-young's sentence. Now we'll learn about the newly revealed cases and accomplices. We'll see how many consecutive crimes they committed. The process was truly horrifying. The first crime, previously thought to be March 6th, but actually February 15th, a month earlier. The victim was Mr. Kim, 30 years old, running a dog breeding farm in Dangjin-gun, Cheongnam. The reason this farm owner became the first target was rumors he had won second prize in the village lottery. Therefore, Jong-in and Jae-young impersonated police to approach and enter the house. When the homeowner brought out drinks, they tied his hands and feet with phone charger cables and threatened, "Give us money now, didn't you win the lottery?" But Mr. Kim firmly refused. Right then, Jong-in couldn't control his anger. used a weapon to attack the farm owner's head and killed him. Then they ransacked the house, and the money found was only about $300,225. 10 days later, February 25th at Baekseok-dong, Cheonan, Cheongnam, Mr. Lee, 34 years old, was driving an imported Volvo. The criminal group deliberately caused a collision accident, tied him up and stabbed him with a knife to kill him. But when opening this person's wallet, there was only $40,130 cash. Then in March, the 2 consecutive robberies mentioned earlier continued to occur. But looking so far, their initial purpose was robbery, and the target was $1,750,000. But from the criminals' perspective, there was no loss and the results were unsatisfactory. Therefore, for the next few months, the 2 temporarily changed plans. They left Chungcheong-do for Seoul and Gyeonggi-do, where there were more wealthy people to continue committing crimes. At the same time, to be more certain in subduing victims so they couldn't escape, they added manpower. Now they brought in Kim Ki-hoon, Jong-in's biological older brother, 36 years old. Ki-hoon had experienced business failure in the past and divorce, so life was very difficult. For that reason, he even had to give his 2 daughters up for adoption. In that situation, his younger brother came saying, "Brother, let's do something big to make big money." And he was trapped. Thus, the criminal organization centered on Jong-in was established. On April 27th and May 5th, 2005, they carried out twice in Namyangju and Hanam, Gyeonggi-do, killing 2 men and robbing property. On May 17th, this time they broke into a supermarket in Yeonggu, Seoul, and intended to kill Mr. Ju, 47 years old. But Mr. Ju resisted more strongly than expected, so the criminal group also panicked and fled hastily without getting money. Now they had experienced failure. Because of this incident, the criminals upgraded their crime methods. What method? Now let's not go to supermarkets anymore. Just upscale residential areas, or like before, we kidnap by car and commit crimes. That's safer. Then they went around relatively wealthier areas like Songpa-gu and Seongbuk-gu, Seoul. On May 27th at Banggi-dong, Songpa-gu, they killed a 31-year-old Korean-American driving an imported car. The crimes weren't over yet. They decided to go to Songpa and Seongbuk-gu to rob upscale houses, but when they arrived, the walls were too high so they couldn't grasp the situation inside houses. The criminals had planned carefully for about 2 months, and finally this time impersonated gas inspection workers. From MBC reporters to police, this time to gas inspection workers. They had entered inside houses. On July 1st, at a house in Seongbuk-gu, they used this method and victim Mr. Lee was stabbed with a knife. Fortunately, he survived, but after this incident, he developed mental illness. On July 17th, just 16 days later, this time they entered an upscale house in Jamsil-dong, Songpa-gu, and killed Mr. Choi, 38 years old. Then they used his card to withdraw 2,800,000 won, 2,100 cash. This case was the last crime by older brother Kim Ki-hoon, because right at this time he was diagnosed with prostate cancer and had to leave the organization for treatment. For this reason, crimes were temporarily suspended for 4 months. However, sometime later, Jae-young recruited a new member. This was Lee Ki-joon, 30 years old, someone he knew from a construction site. Thus, a 3-person group was re-established. They divided new roles and at the same time returned to Chungcheongnam-do, which was more familiar to them. The attempted murder in Boryong-si and the murder of Mr. Kim, mentioned earlier, were carried out. Only later did we learn that from November 18th when they killed Mr. Kim, first appearing in today's video, until December 24th when Jong-in was caught, nearly a month, during this time they committed 3 additional crimes total: attempted murder, hostage-taking, special assault. Finally, summarizing the crimes they committed: 9 murders, 1 hostage-taking, 2 robberies with injury, 1 attempted robbery, 1 special theft, total 18 cases. In 10 months, 9 people died. But here's another point of doubt. Although they continuously committed crimes, the total cash the criminals actually robbed was only about 10 million won, 7,500. This is relatively little money compared to their scale. So why, despite continuous failures, did they not stop committing crimes? And why did they continue killing? For this question, an expert gave a chilling answer. It seems they increasingly enjoyed the act of killing. Therefore, killing also became familiar to them. Finally, after all additional confessions were given, main perpetrator Kim Jong-in was still executed, Jae-young and older brother Kim Ki-hoon received life imprisonment. Finally, Ki-joon was sentenced to 7 years in prison. And that's today's case. Do you think those were appropriate punishments for the criminals in this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for following and see you in the next videos.